Marcus had always known what privilege looked like. It didn't look like anything specific because it was invisible. That was the whole point. Privilege was the absence of friction. It was the smooth operation of a world designed to move him forward without resistance. He was 16 years old, and he'd never had to think about money, not in the way people thought about money. He'd never counted his dollars. He'd never chosen between needs. He'd never lain awake at night calculating whether he could afford tomorrow. Money, for Marcus, was something that simply existed in the background, like electricity or clean water, or the assumption that when he woke up, there would be food available. His mother, Elena, had told him 1,000 times that this wasn't always her reality. She'd built everything from nothing. She'd slept in her car. She'd eaten ramen for dinner and skipped breakfast to save money. She'd taught herself to code using library computers and free online courses, and now, at 48 years old, she was a billionaire. She'd founded 3 successful tech companies. She'd been on magazine covers. She'd been described as visionary, revolutionary, unstoppable. And she loved him fiercely, in the way that people love the thing they've built after building everything else. Tonight was his 16th birthday, and she'd arranged a dinner at Lumiere, the restaurant that required reservations months in advance. The kind of restaurant that didn't advertise because people who could afford to eat there already knew where it was. She'd taken the evening off, something she rarely did, and she'd dressed carefully in a way that suggested this mattered to her. Her dark hair was pulled back. She wore the kind of jewelry that didn't try to announce itself. She looked like what she was, a person who'd learned that true power didn't need to scream. In the car on the way downtown, she asked him what he wanted. From dinner? He asked. From everything, she said. From life? From the next year? What do you want, Marcus? He didn't have a good answer. At 16, he'd never really had to want anything, because the architecture of his life was already built. He had every opportunity. He had every door opened for him. He had resources. What more could there be to want? I don't know, he said. Maybe just a good dinner? Elena smiled, but there was something sad in it. That's not enough, she said. You should want more than a good dinner. You should want something that scares you, something that costs you something. He didn't understand what she meant. How could he want something that cost him something when nothing had ever cost him anything? They drove through the city as it transformed around them. The neighborhoods changed gradually at first, then more dramatically. They passed through areas where people were waiting at bus stops, where storefronts had security gates, where the sidewalks were crowded with the everyday texture of regular life. Then those areas gave way to others, fewer people, better-dressed people, wider streets, cleaner sidewalks. They entered the financial district. Here the buildings scraped the sky. The people moved with purpose. The cars were expensive. The restaurants didn't have signs. They just had dark doors and reputations. Elena pulled up to the valet stand at Lumiere. A young man in a uniform opened her door. Another young man opened Marcus's door. They stepped out onto pavement that had been swept so recently that it gleamed. The night was cool and clear. The city sprawled around them, thousands of windows lit against the darkness. And that's when Marcus saw him. The man was asleep about 40 feet away, his back against the dark brick of a building that had no retail purpose, a building that existed only to separate the street from the elegant interior where Elena and Marcus were about to go. He had a cardboard sign propped beside him, though Marcus couldn't read what it said. The man wore clothes that had been worn until they'd lost their original color, until they'd become a kind of gray that was the color of outdoor living. Next to him, curled against his body like a small animal seeking warmth from the only source available, was a child, a girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with hair that hadn't been brushed in days and clothes that matched her father's in their worn testimony to a different kind of life. Marcus stopped walking. His mother was already halfway to the restaurant entrance. She turned back. "Come on," she said, not unkindly. "We have a reservation. They hold the table." But Marcus couldn't move. He was staring at the man's face. It was the familiarity of it that held him, not the weathered quality, not the stubble or the way his hair fell across his forehead. It was the underlying structure, the shape of the jaw, the angle of the cheekbones, the way the face was put together underneath everything that had happened to it. It was like looking at a photograph of his own face, aged and broken and remade by circumstance. "Marcus," his mother called. She was already at the restaurant door. He tore his eyes away from the man and the girl and followed his mother inside. The restaurant folded around him like an embrace. Soft light emanated from fixtures that looked like they'd been designed by someone who understood that true luxury was absence. Absence of noise, absence of crowds, absence of anything that would disturb the careful choreography of an evening designed for people who mattered. The host greeted his mother by name. "Ms. Chen, wonderful to see you. Your regular table is ready." They were led through a room where tables were spaced far enough apart that conversations couldn't bleed into each other. The windows looked out over the city, and from this height, they were on the 23rd floor. The street where the man and girl were sleeping was invisible. The homeless were literally beneath this place, underneath its floor and walls and windows, removed from view. They sat. Menus were presented. The menus were leather-bound and had no prices, which meant they were expensive enough that the price would insult the customer. A server explained the evening's offerings: 7 courses, paired wines, a journey through texture and flavor, and the chef's understanding of what food could be when money was no object. His mother ordered for both of them. She always did. She had opinions about wine and ingredient sourcing and the philosophy behind each dish. She taught herself about food the same way she taught herself about everything else, through obsessive study and refined experience. "You're quiet," she said once the server had moved away. "I'm fine," Marcus said, "just thinking about the food." It wasn't true. He was thinking about the man on the street, about the girl sleeping against him, about the way she trusted completely in his presence, the way she'd curled against him as though his body was the safest place in the world, even though they were sleeping on concrete surrounded by danger. The first course arrived. Scallops so delicate they barely registered as having texture. They were served on a bed of something that looked like foam, something that dissolved on the tongue before the brain could quite understand what it was eating. The presentation involved a single microgreen and a sauce so carefully applied that it looked like a brushstroke. "What do you think?" his mother asked. "It's good," Marcus said. She looked at him with the particular frustration of someone who'd paid excellent money for something and wanted the recipient to understand the excellence. "It's not just good," she said. "It's exemplary. The scallops are from a specific region. The sauce is his own invention. He spent 3 years developing the technique to get the foam to hold this exact texture. This is mastery, Marcus. This is what happens when someone dedicates themselves completely to their craft." He nodded and ate another scallop, but he wasn't thinking about the chef or the 3 years of development. He was thinking about the man on the street and wondering what craft he possessed, what knowledge he held that had been made irrelevant by circumstance. The second course came. A pasta so thin it was almost transparent, served with butter infused with something that smelled like the essence of autumn. His mother explained the sourcing of the butter. It came from cows that had grazed on a specific pasture in a specific region, and the farmer had been doing this for 30 years, and the butter was distributed to only 5 restaurants in the world, one of which was this one, and that was why it tasted the way it did. "The thing about excellence," his mother was saying, "is that it's not an accident. People think that if they're smart enough, talented enough, they can succeed. But it's not true. Excellence requires obsession. It requires choosing your craft and then dedicating every hour of your life to it. Most people don't have the discipline. Most people get tired or distracted, or they want something easier. But the people who become truly great, the people who do work like this, they understand that there's no shortcut. You have to pay the price." Marcus listened to his mother talk about prices. He'd never heard her use that word with quite that weight before. The price of excellence, the price of mastery, the price of building something. He thought about the man on the street. He wondered what price that man had paid. He wondered if he'd been excellent at something once, if he'd paid the price and done the work and still ended up sleeping on concrete. A man in an expensive suit approached their table. He was one of his mother's business associates, someone Marcus had seen at company events and dinners like this one. "Elena," the man said, "wonderful to see you. And Marcus, happy birthday, young man. I hear you're thinking about Stanford." "Still exploring options," Marcus said, which was the answer he'd learned to give. His mother wanted him to go to MIT. His father wanted him to go to Harvard. His guidance counselor wanted him to think about what he actually wanted, which seemed like a novel concept in a world where his future had already been architected by people who cared about him. "Stanford's excellent, but MIT is where innovation happens," the man said. "That's where you'll find the people who are pushing boundaries. You want to be around people like that at your age. It shapes you. It tells you what's possible." The man stood there for another moment, establishing his connection to Elena, signaling to everyone in the restaurant that he was the kind of person who could approach the billionaire's table. Then he moved on, back to his own table, back to his own dinner, back to his own evidence of success. "That's David Wu," his mother said. "He sold his company for $200 million. He was 34. Marcus nodded. He'd learned not to ask follow-up questions about the successful people his mother knew. There were always more successful people. There was always someone who'd done something bigger or more profitable or more innovative. The world of his mother's acquaintances was an endless cascade of achievement. He looked toward the window. From 23 stories up, the street had disappeared. There was just the city, vast and glittering, and below it, beneath the view, the parts that had to exist, but that were better not seen while you were eating 7-course dinners. The third course arrived, a risotto that had been made with some kind of stock that had taken 10 hours to prepare. It was creamy and rich and tasted like it contained the essence of flavor itself, boiled down and concentrated until regular food would taste like nothing by comparison. "So," his mother said, "I've been thinking about your future, not college, beyond college. I've been thinking about what comes next." This was how his mother talked about the future, not in terms of what Marcus wanted, but in terms of what the future was, what it would be, what she'd decided it should be. "I have contacts in venture capital," she continued. "I could have you set up with internships when you're 18. You could start building a network now. You could be thinking about what you want to build, what problem you want to solve. By the time you're 30, if you're smart and focused, you could have your own company. You could be successful." "That sounds good," Marcus said, because it was the right thing to say. "It's not just good," she said. "It's a path. It's a designed life. You have advantages that most people will never have. You have connections, capital, education, access. What you do with that, that's on you. But you should understand what you have. You should use it." Marcus understood on an intellectual level what his mother was saying. He had advantages. He should use them. It was simple. It was logical. It was how the world worked for people like him. But he was thinking about the girl on the street. He was thinking about whether she had a designed life, or whether her life was being designed by circumstance, by accident, by the random convergence of events that had placed her on concrete instead of in a restaurant like this. The fourth course came, a fish course. Delicate white flesh served with a reduction of something dark and complex. The server explained that the fish had been caught that morning, that it had been selected specifically for its fat content and texture, that the chef had chosen this particular preparation to highlight its essential character. "Your father," his mother said suddenly, "didn't understand privilege." This was surprising. She rarely mentioned his father. His father had left when Marcus was very young. Marcus had vague memories of a man, tall and patient, but nothing concrete. His mother didn't like to talk about him. "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "He thought privilege was something separate from him," she said. He thought he could just exist in it without thinking about it. He didn't understand that privilege comes with responsibility. It comes with the obligation to be worthy of it, to use it properly, to build something with it. She took a sip of wine. When I built my first company, he was skeptical. He thought I was being reckless. He thought I should be satisfied with a normal life, a normal job, a normal existence. He wanted me to settle, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't just exist. I had to build, and that mismatch, that's why we didn't work out. Marcus understood suddenly that his mother wasn't just talking about his father. She was talking about herself. She was talking about the fact that privilege, for her, could never just be something passive. It had to be something she'd earned, something she'd built, something she could look at and say, I did this. No one gave this to me. And now she was telling him that he needed to do the same thing. Not inherit her world, but earn his place in it. I want you to think about what you're going to build, she said, not what you're going to inherit, not the connections you'll use or the money you'll have. What are you going to create that will make you worthy of these advantages? It was a heavy question. It was maybe the heaviest question anyone had ever asked him, and he didn't have an answer. When his mother stepped away to take a phone call, Marcus sat alone at the table. Around him, other people celebrated other occasions. He watched a woman open a jewelry box. He watched a teenager receive car keys. He watched a group of businessmen laugh at something one of them had said. He watched servers move between tables with the invisible precision of people who'd been trained to fade into the background. He thought about what his mother had said. He thought about the obligation that came with privilege. He thought about the man on the street and whether he felt obligated to anything, or whether obligation was something that only applied to people who had choices. And then he thought, I need to see him again. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to his mother. I'm not feeling well. I'm going to the restroom. She was still on the phone. She gave him a thumbs up, not really paying attention. Marcus stood up. He walked through the restaurant, past the tables of successful people, past the servers, past the careful choreography of privilege. He walked toward the exit. His heart was moving faster than it should. He'd never done this before. He'd never broken the script. He'd never made a choice that wasn't already written into his life. The door opened onto the cool night air. The street was quieter than it had been when he arrived, though it wasn't quiet. It was just quieter than the restaurant, quieter than the world inside, quieter than the careful orchestration of people like his mother trying to construct the perfect evening. He walked toward where he'd seen the man and the girl. They were still there. The man was still asleep, his back against the brick. The girl was still curled against him, her small body folded against his larger frame, seeking and finding warmth from the only source available to her in the world. Marcus stopped about 10 feet away. He didn't want to startle them. He didn't want to come at them like a threat. Hey, he said quietly. Hey, are you awake? The man's eyes opened. They were alert immediately. The alertness of someone who sleeps lightly, who never fully rests, who keeps part of his brain always listening for danger. He took in Marcus in a moment. The expensive clothes, the youth, the obvious wealth. Whatever he was thinking, he kept it off his face. Can I help you? The man said. His voice was rougher than Marcus expected, but not unkind. Marcus didn't know what he was going to say. I wanted to talk to you. Is that okay? The man considered this. You're not from the police, he said. So I guess it's okay. My name is Marcus, he said. He sat down on the sidewalk, right there next to this stranger who somehow looked like him. The man's eyes widened slightly. It was small, but it was there. Recognition, or something like recognition. That's a good name, the man said carefully. I'm David, and this is Sophie. Sophie didn't wake. She slept with the absolute, untroubled peace of a child who knew she was safe, even on concrete, because her father's arms were around her. How old is she? Marcus asked. 7, David said. Almost 8. She looks peaceful. She is peaceful, David said. She's a good kid, better than I deserve, probably. There was something in the way he said it that made Marcus want to correct him, to tell him that he was wrong, that he deserved good things, that everyone deserved good things. But he didn't know how to say that without sounding naive. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "You can ask," David said. "I might not be able to answer." "How did you end up here? On the street, I mean." David was quiet for a long moment. Marcus thought he might not answer. The night pressed around them. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then faded. The restaurant above them hummed with the quiet sounds of people eating and talking and existing in a different world. "I was an architect," David said finally. His voice was measured, like he'd told this story before, but still meant every word. "I designed buildings, not the famous ones, the ones most people didn't notice. Office buildings, warehouses, municipal facilities, solid work, necessary work. I was good at it." He paused. Sophie shifted against him but didn't wake. "I had a wife," he continued. "I had a house. I had a job that paid well enough. I had the life you're supposed to have. The life that's supposed to make you happy." Another pause. "And then I got sick," he said. "Something neurological. It started small, just occasional numbness. I thought it would go away. It didn't. It got worse. Eventually, I couldn't do the fine work anymore. My hands shook. My concentration was affected. I tried to keep working, but I couldn't do it." He looked down at his hands as though they were foreign objects, as though they'd betrayed him. "My wife left," he said. "Not immediately. She tried for a while, but she had her own life, her own career. She couldn't carry me and herself. I don't blame her." That was fair. Sophie stirred again. David adjusted his arm around her automatically, a gesture so natural that he probably didn't even realize he was doing it. "I lost the house," he continued. "The medical bills were substantial. Even with insurance there was so much, and I couldn't work. I got disability eventually, but it wasn't enough. I burned through my savings. I tried to get back into architecture, but the illness was progressive. I couldn't do it." He was quiet for a moment. "And then I lost my job," he said, "which meant I lost my apartment. And then there was Sophie. I got custody. Her mother wanted to move on, get a clean start. Sophie came to live with me full-time, which meant I became her primary caregiver, which meant I couldn't work at all, not even if my body had let me." He looked at the sleeping girl with an expression that contained so much weight, it was like watching someone hold up the sky. "So here we are," he said, "on the street, sleeping in doorways, getting food where we can. It's not ideal, but Sophie is okay. She's safe. She has her father. That's what matters." Marcus heard his mother's voice from earlier in the evening. "Excellence requires obsession. It requires choosing your craft and then dedicating every hour of your life to it." But David had done that. He'd chosen his craft. He'd dedicated himself to it. And then circumstance had removed him from it, and he'd adapted. He'd become something else. He'd become a father on the street, dedicated to keeping his daughter safe in a world that was designed to make that as difficult as possible. "I'm sorry," Marcus said. It was inadequate, but it was all he had. "Don't be," David said. "Sorry doesn't change anything. What matters is what you do with what you know." And something shifted in Marcus then, something small but crucial. He understood that his mother had asked him earlier, "What are you going to build?" She'd meant it as a challenge, as something that required innovation and business acumen, and the kind of focused determination that had made her a billionaire. But David had answered that question without knowing he was answering it. David was building something. He was building a life for his daughter. He was building stability on concrete. He was building dignity without resources. He was building it every single day, every moment, through choices that cost him everything. "Did you ever want to give up?" Marcus asked. David looked at him. "Every day," he said. "Every single day I think about how much easier it would be if I just let her go into the system. If I just surrendered and let someone else handle it. That would be easier. But you didn't." "No," David said, "because I looked at her, and I thought about what it would mean to let her down. What it would mean for her to know that her father gave up. What it would mean for her to grow up thinking she wasn't worth fighting for. And I couldn't do that. I can't do that." He looked at Marcus directly then. "You're a good kid," he said. I can tell. You came out here when you could have just ignored us. You sat down like we were human. Most people don't do that. Most people look away. But you didn't. And that tells me something about your character. Marcus wanted to cry, but he didn't. Instead, he reached into his pocket. He had cash. His mother always made sure he had cash, in case he needed anything. He pulled out several bills and held them toward David. David looked at the money, then at Marcus. He didn't take it. I don't want your money, he said. But Sophie, Marcus started. I know, David said, but I didn't tell you my story so you'd give me money. I told you my story so you'd understand something. You're rich, you're privileged, you have every advantage, and none of that is your fault. You didn't earn it. You were just born into it. And that's not a crime, but it is a responsibility. He gestured at Sophie. This girl's life and mine, our life together, it's meaningful. It's not comfortable. It's not easy, but it's meaningful. And when you grow up, when you build the life you're going to build, I want you to remember that. I want you to remember that the most valuable things can't be purchased. That character can't be bought. That love on concrete is more real than anything you'll find in a restaurant like the one you came from. Marcus was crying then, quietly, without making noise. My father, David said, measured love in achievements. He measured my worth in accomplishments. He couldn't understand that sometimes the most important thing you do is just show up, just be there. Just refuse to let someone you love fall. And I never had the courage to tell him that his measurement was wrong, that he was wrong. I just failed in his eyes, and then I lost him, and I never got to say that his love was insufficient, that measuring love in achievement is a form of cruelty. He looked at Marcus again. Don't do that, he said. Don't measure people in achievement. Don't measure yourself in achievement. Measure yourself in kindness. Measure yourself in showing up. Measure yourself in refusal to let go. Marcus left the money there on the ground next to David anyway. For tomorrow, he said. For Sophie. Please. David didn't argue. He just looked at the bills, then nodded. Marcus stood up. His legs were stiff. The concrete had been hard. His expensive pants would have a stain on them. His mother would notice. What's your last name? David asked. Marcus turned back. Chen, he said. Marcus Chen. David's expression changed. It was subtle, but it was there. Something like recognition, deeper than before. That's a good name, he said again. When Marcus walked back into the restaurant, his mother was already back at the table. She looked up from her menu. The 5th course was about to arrive, and noticed immediately that something was wrong. What happened? She said. What happened to you? There's a man outside, Marcus said. He sat down and looked at his mother directly. Sleeping on the street with his daughter. He used to be an architect. He got sick. He lost his job, his house, his wife, and now he's sleeping on concrete trying to keep his daughter safe. Elena's expression hardened slightly. I don't have time for this conversation, she said. We're celebrating your birthday. I know, Marcus said. I know we are. But I need to tell you something. He told me something. He said the only difference between him and us is luck. That's all. Just luck. We got lucky. He didn't. But he's still good. He's still trying. He's still building something. He's building a life for his daughter. And it's just as important as anything you've built. Elena set down her glass carefully. She was someone who controlled her emotions, who understood the value of composure. But Marcus could see something moving under her expression, something she was holding down. You're 16 years old, she said. You don't understand how the world works yet. Maybe not, Marcus said, but I understand that. I understand that luck matters. I understand that if I'd been born different, I'd be sleeping on a street somewhere, and I think that matters. Elena looked away. She looked out at the city, at all the lights representing all the invisible lives happening below their view, at all the people sleeping and struggling and trying in the darkness. Your father, she said quietly, was very good at accepting help. Marcus didn't know what that meant. But something in his mother's voice had changed. Something had cracked open. When I first met your father, she continued, he offered to help me. I was sleeping in my car. He offered to let me stay with him. I said no. I said I could do it on my own. And I could. I did. But I spent so much energy refusing help that I didn't have any left for actually living. I was so busy proving that I didn't need anyone, that I became a person no one wanted to be around. She looked at Marcus. There were tears in her eyes now, though she still wouldn't let them fall. Your father wanted me to slow down, she said. He wanted me to be happy instead of successful. He wanted me to choose him over my career, and I couldn't do it. I was too afraid that if I stopped building, I would disappear, that if I wasn't working toward something, I wasn't anyone. She was quiet for a moment. I want you to be different, she said. I want you to understand that you can have success and still have a life. You can have privilege and still have compassion. You don't have to choose, and I want you to help that man. Marcus felt something expand in his chest. Really? Really, she said. Let's finish this meal quickly, then we'll go find him again. The 5th course came, and they ate it without much conversation. The 6th course came, and they barely tasted it. The 7th course came, and they just waited for it to be over. When they finished, Elena called for the check. She paid a substantial amount that included a generous tip, and they left the restaurant. They took the elevator down to the street level. When the doors opened, the world was different. The air was cooler, the space was wider, the beauty of it was rougher, less designed. They walked toward where David and Sophie had been, and they were still there, exactly where they'd been before. Sophie had woken up now and was sitting quietly against her father, watching the city. When she saw Eleanor and Marcus approaching, she moved closer to David, seeking safety in his proximity. Eleanor knelt down to be at eye level with Sophie. She didn't say much. She just looked at the girl, and the girl looked back, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with words. It was recognition, Marcus thought. Recognition that they were both human. Recognition that circumstance divided them, but character didn't. Then Elena stood up and looked at David. "I'm Elena Chen," she said. "I'm this boy's mother." David's face went very still. "Chen," he said. "Yes," Elena said. "Chen." "My name is David," he said. "David Chen." Elena's expression didn't change, but Marcus could see the moment the information landed, the moment she understood that this man with her last name was not a coincidence. "How do you spell your name?" she asked. "Chen," David said. "My family was from Shanghai originally. My father—" "Your father's name," Elena said, and her voice had changed. It was steady, but there was something underneath it. "What was your father's name?" "James Chen," David said. "James Chen III. He died 7 years ago." Elena closed her eyes. "Your brother," she said. She opened her eyes again. "Your brother's name was Michael." David's hands tightened around Sophie. "How do you know that?" "I was married to him," Elena said. "I'm Marcus's mother. Michael is Marcus's father." The silence that followed was vast. It contained everything, all the years of separation, all the loss, all the ways that families could fracture and remain fractured, even when the people involved still existed, still moved through the world, still loved the people they were supposed to love. "He left," David said finally. "My brother left the family. Our father cut him off. I never knew what happened to him after that. I was too young to understand. By the time I was old enough to ask, he was gone, and father wouldn't talk about him." "He left me too," Elena said. 12 years ago, but not before we had Marcus." She looked at Marcus, then back at David. "Michael loved you," she said. "I know he did, but he was trapped in his family. He was trapped in the idea of what he was supposed to be. He couldn't break free, and I was someone who could. I was someone who broke free from everything, and he wanted to be with me, but he also wanted his family, and he couldn't have both." Sophie was watching this conversation with the careful attention of a child who understood that something important was happening, even if she didn't understand the words. "I have his address," Elena said, "from the divorce papers. He's in Boston, I think. Or he was, 12 years ago. I could find him, if you wanted me to." "He doesn't know about Sophie," David said. "He doesn't know I'm his brother. He doesn't know any of this." "No," Elena said, "but Marcus knows now, and I know now, and that's something." What happened next took months. Elena had resources that David didn't. She had lawyers, she had doctors, she had the kind of money that could open doors that were closed to people like David. She used those resources. First, she found David a place to live. Not a charity case, but an actual apartment, with heat and running water and walls and a roof. Sophie had a bedroom. David had space to recover from years of sleeping on concrete. Then she found him a doctor, a good doctor, someone who specialized in neurological conditions. The diagnosis was confirmed, a degenerative neurological condition that was indeed progressive, but which could be managed with medication and physical therapy and the right kind of support. Then she connected him with social services. She knew people who worked in those fields. She made phone calls. She opened doors. Within a month, David had a job, not architecture, but design consulting. It was remote, which meant he could work from home if he had bad days. It was flexible, which meant he could take care of Sophie when she got home from school. It paid enough to give him dignity. But the real revelation came when Elena's lawyers dug deeper into David's legal history. David had a trust fund. His father had set it up years ago before he cut David off. The trust fund had accumulated interest over decades. It was substantial, enough to change the trajectory of David's entire life. "Why didn't you claim it?" Eleanor asked him when the lawyers told her this. She was sitting in his new apartment drinking tea, watching Sophie do homework at the kitchen table. "Because I was too proud," David said. "Because I thought that taking money from my father, even after he was dead, would be accepting his love. And I was so angry at him that I refused to accept it. So I left it there. I let it accumulate, and I slept on the street instead." Eleanor looked at Sophie. The girl was concentrating hard on her math problems, her tongue poking out slightly as she worked. "Your father," Eleanor said, "also struggled with accepting help. He struggled with understanding that love didn't have to be conditional on achievement, that sometimes people gave you things because they loved you, not because you'd earned them." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to help you claim that trust fund," she said. "And then we're going to find your brother, because I think he deserves to know that you exist, and I think you deserve to know who he became." Finding Michael took longer than anyone expected. He'd changed his phone number. He'd moved. He'd to some extent disappeared from his own past, or tried to, but Elena was very good at finding people. She'd made her fortune in part by understanding how information flowed through systems. She found him in Boston, where he'd moved with his new wife. He had 2 more children besides Marcus. He'd built a quiet life, a normal life, the kind of life he couldn't build with Elena because she was too big, too ambitious, too much. Elena didn't call him. Instead, she wrote him a letter. "Dear Michael, I've found your brother. He was homeless. He had a daughter. He was sleeping on the street. But he's okay now. He's going to be okay. He wants to meet you. He's waited a very long time. I'm not asking you to make any choice about me, about what happened between us. That's in the past. But he's your family, and he needs you. Your son knows about him now. He understands something about luck and circumstance and grace. He understands something that I'm still learning. Come home." Elena Michael came home 3 weeks later. The meeting happened at Elena's house. It was elegant and carefully designed, the product of years of building and success. Michael looked at it and said, "This is beautiful. This is what you wanted." "It was what I wanted," Elena said. "Now I want something different." David was nervous. He'd built a stable life now. He had his apartment, his job, his daughter in school, his trust fund accessed and secured. But meeting his brother after so many years, after so much separation, was different from the constructed stability. It was raw and real and terrifying. When Michael saw him, he didn't say anything. He just looked at his brother's face, but different, shaped by different experiences, and something broke in him. "I'm sorry," Michael said. "I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I didn't come back. I'm sorry I let our father cut you off." "You had to leave," David said. "You couldn't stay and be yourself. I understand that now." Michael was crying. I didn't know about you. I didn't know what happened. I know, David said, and then they embraced, and 13 years of separation compressed into a moment, and the family that had been fractured began very slowly to heal. Sophie watched this from the doorway. She understood at some level that her father had a brother, that she had an uncle, that her life was suddenly larger than it had been yesterday. Marcus watched too. He understood that something important had happened, something that wouldn't have happened if he hadn't left the restaurant, if he hadn't sat down on the sidewalk, if he hadn't paid attention. Later, when everyone had calmed down, when Michael and David had talked for hours and said everything they needed to say, Marcus asked his father a question. "Why did you leave?" Marcus asked. "Why did you leave Mom and me?" Michael looked at his son. He looked older than Marcus remembered. He looked like someone who'd spent years carrying a weight and was only now putting it down. "Because I couldn't be the person she needed," Michael said. "Your mother needed someone who could understand her drive, someone who could match her ambition, someone who could build something alongside her, and I needed to be smaller than that. I needed a quiet life. I needed permission to just be instead of constantly achieve. And we couldn't give each other those things." He paused. "But meeting you tonight," Michael said, "meeting your uncle, learning what you did, I'm proud of you. I'm proud that you saw someone in need and you paid attention, that you sat down, that you recognized their humanity even though they were completely invisible to everyone else." Marcus felt something settle in his chest. It felt like understanding. The months that followed unfolded in ways that nobody had predicted. David started working full-time. He took a degree program in sustainable architecture, something he'd always wanted to do but never had time for. He became part of Elena's company in an advisory capacity, using his knowledge to make their buildings more beautiful, more human-centered, more conscious of the people who inhabited them and the people on the streets outside them. Michael and Elena didn't get back together. That bridge had been crossed and couldn't be recrossed, but they developed a respectful friendship. They saw each other at holidays. They talked about Michael's marriage, about the life he'd built, about the life he was living now. It was good. It was what they both needed. Sophie thrived. She made friends. She joined a choir. She became the kind of child who'd been sleeping on concrete just months before, but who carried no trauma about it because her father had protected her. He'd kept her safe. He'd refused to let circumstance define her. And Marcus changed too. He went to MIT like his mother wanted, but he studied something unexpected. He studied social architecture. He studied how systems could be designed to catch people instead of letting them fall. He studied the invisible scaffolding that held cities together and the places where that scaffolding had fractured, where people fell through the cracks. When he graduated, he didn't join a venture capital firm. Instead, he started an organization focused on housing insecurity. He used his privilege and his access and his capital to design solutions. He worked with architects like his uncle. He worked with policy people who understood how systems worked. He worked to figure out how to make sure that less people ended up on the street, and that the people who did had a path out. It wasn't as profitable as venture capital. It wasn't as glamorous, but it was meaningful. It was the kind of work that David had told him about, the work that mattered because people's lives depended on it, not because it made money or won awards or proved anything to anyone. Years later, Marcus was back at a restaurant like Billionaire. He was there because someone was hosting a fundraiser for his organization, and he'd been invited to speak. As he looked out at the room, the people in expensive clothes, the servers moving silently, the obvious abundance and privilege, he thought about the night of his 16th birthday. He thought about his mother in that restaurant, talking about excellence and price and the obligation that came with privilege. He thought about David on the street, telling him that the only difference between them was luck. He thought about his father, broken by the weight of impossible choices. And he thought, this is what grace looks like. Grace is not being rescued. Grace is being recognized. Grace is someone seeing you clearly, really seeing you, seeing past the circumstance to the character underneath, and choosing to help not because you're pitiful, but because you're human. That's what David had shown him on the street. That's what his father had been trying to learn. That's what his mother was slowly understanding. Grace is the recognition that we're all just a few decisions away from someone else's fate, that luck matters, that circumstance matters, that the difference between thriving and surviving is often just someone who was willing to look and then was willing to act. The fundraiser raised enough money to house 200 families. 200 families would have safe shelter. 200 families would have a path forward. And somewhere in the city, there was probably someone sleeping on concrete right now, protected by another person's love, waiting for the moment when someone would look and finally see them. That's what Marcus thought as he stood at the podium and told his story. That's what he wanted people to understand. You might be the person who looks. You might be the person who sits down on the sidewalk and says, "I see you. I see that you're human. I see your character even though the world has made you invisible." Or you might be the person being seen. You might be the person on the concrete. And if that's you, you should know that grace is coming. It's coming because there are people like Marcus. There are people who understand that we're all just luck away from being each other, and they've decided to do something about it. Either way, you matter. Your character matters. Your presence in the world matters. And the difference between thriving and surviving, between being visible and being invisible, is often just one person who was willing to pay attention.